Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 News. The Monaco Grand Prix is this weekend. Charles Leclerc won famously around this circuit this time last year, but this year Charles Leclerc says he has absolutely no chance to repeat the feat, reckoning this Ferrari is simply nowhere near good enough in the slow speed corners, and guess what Monaco is full of from start to finish. Hamilton is slightly more positive, but many of the other drivers believe that yes, it's going to be an uphill battle for Ferrari this weekend, especially because their quali pace hasn't been good, and we know how critical that is around this circuit. Who's going to win? Very much intro to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I greatly appreciate it. Plenty to get into today as always. We are going to begin with the Formula 1 movie because yesterday there was a premiere of the film shown to the drivers and also the team principals. Here's Hamilton turning up, got George Russell, etc. And actually we do have all of the guys. This was a pretty funny image for a couple of reasons. I'll just give you guys a couple of seconds to figure out why this has been causing a little bit of controversy. Yes, that's right. If we zoom in here on the left-hand side, you'll find Fernando Alonso certainly giving Liam Lawson something of a look, right? Now, we know that these guys had a bit of drama last year at the Austin Grand Prix weekends when they had their moments, let's say. Lawson after the race said, I'm not here to make friends, I'm here to win. That went down well after he joined Red Bull, and we know what Alonso's like. This guy holds grudges, right? So I'm sure that having to sit next to Lawson was at least something for Alonso to think about. The other funny thing is that everyone else turned up in their team kit. We've got, Antonelli, Franco, Tsunoda, like everyone is here of those who attended. Not every driver was here. There's no Lance Stroll. But actually, yeah, I see that Charles Leclerc is also not wearing his team kit in the back either. But effectively, it's just Leclerc, Hamilton, and Alonso. Everyone else has, done what they were meant to do. I guess the team probably told them that you should wear the team top, which is a pretty funny thing to go watch a film in, really. But yeah, here's another image of it. So yeah, how many drivers do we have here? 4, 8, 9, 10... and 18, yeah. So we're missing 2 drivers, one of which is Lance Stroll, and one of which, of course, is Max Verstappen, and we'll get into why here in a second. Now, look, of course the drivers are going to say, oh, the film's great, you should go and watch it. It's the same way that when they're asked to comment on, oh, the new Formula 1 game, is it any good? What do you think they're going to say, right? So this is what it is. But equally, the comments from the drivers on this have been pretty interesting. I think all of us really know what we're going to get here with this Formula 1 movie. It's probably going to be visually quite spectacular. I mean, it's been produced by Joseph Kosinski, and I mean, Hans Zimmer is doing the soundtrack, which is mega, but also Kosinski made Top Gun Maverick, and look, I'm sure that for those who are in the Air Force and stuff, they watch Top Gun and they're like, that isn't right, like, that's not realistic. But as a movie, as a piece of entertainment, Top Gun Maverick is a sensational film, in my opinion. Now, I don't think Formula 1's going to be as good as that, or F1, or whatever they're calling the film, F1 the movie or something, and it's coming out shortly. You know, the whole storyline of Brad Pitt, like 60-year-old driver coming back from the dead to presumably, like, win the championship or something with a team that was a backmarker. I mean, like, okay, it's a great story, but from... it's Hollywood. From a Formula 1 fan perspective, you're not going to probably watch it and think, yeah, that seems realistic, right? And I'm sure there's going to be plenty of moments just like that. But the drivers did say that there are some elements where there's some realism. They are, let's say they're deploying energy, there's battery deployment, there's different strap modes for the engine, there's lockups and crashes in familiar corners, right? There are some elements that they've maybe got right from a Formula 1 fan perspective, but I think like the overall feeling of it will be, difficult to rationalize. Maybe in the same way that in Top Gun Maverick, was theoretically in this universe, was Maverick, Tom Cruise's character, really fit to come back and lead the mission in the way that he did and like school all of these young top fighter pilots? Look, it's a film and that is what it is. And science says I truly enjoyed it. I think for F1 experts, we're going to see a bit of things like Netflix. So he's basically saying that this is Drive to Survive. You can tell that they're a bit Hollywood-esque. I believe it will do very well for the people that don't know anything about F1, which is a pretty funny way to say. It's a pretty funny way to say that if you don't know it, look, I don't need to recontextualize this sentence, but you know what I'm trying to get at, right? That the film, for people who know Formula 1, is probably not going to be great, but if you have no idea on the realism of the subject, then it's going to be a great story, I think is the point. Now, Max Verstappen also wasn't there. Lance Stroll said that he had to do some other stuff, so, whatever. He didn't expand on that at all, but Max Verstappen did and said that it wasn't a mandatory event, it was just my private time. I preferred to spend that private time at home, especially because in F1, you're away from so much already. And with his daughter, totally understand it, right? I mean, he did mention that now the family's growing, I definitely want to spend more time at home with the family. And he was asked, are you going to watch the film? And he was like, yeah, at some points, I guess I'll tune in. Because at the end of the day, the drivers were in the film, right? Like, they played their part, some of them more than others. I mean, Max, I think, is actually quite a crucial part of the plot. I mean, I may be wrong, but I think there was that clip of, I don't know if it was Monza or exactly where it was, but it looked like in the trailer that there was let's say, a bit of, racing incident, shall we say, between Max and Brad Pitt's character in the film. Sonny Hayes, isn't that what he's called? So it looks like Max is kind of in the film. Now, not really doing any acting necessarily. It's less about that, but, you remember that grid walk they did where they had the Apex Grand Prix drivers there as well. So, Max probably plays some reasonable part in the plot, because presumably if Apex GP or whatever are going to win the championship, then Max has to be a part of it as a championship protagonist. So, I think Max will watch it at some point. He was in the film. The other guys were in the film as well. But the funny thing was that obviously he said, I wanted to spend time at home with the family, with the new daughter. But actually, while the screening was happening, he turned on the stream and was just sim racing, right, on Twitch. So, clearly this is how he preferred to spend his time than spending his time with his colleagues, some of which he probably doesn't like that much, and of course all the team principals as well at the premiere of this film. So, I think Max made a bit of a statement. George Russell was on camera for about 3 seconds as well. He made a pretty funny comment on that. The race did kind of break down some of the more, obviously universal praise. The film was getting gassed up by all the drivers, which is not really a surprise. Pretty funny to see some of the statements. I mean, Behrman says in a bit of a Hollywood way, as you would expect. Antonelli says it was long, but really well made, which I thought was pretty funny to say it was long. I don't know if Antonelli is one of these new TikTok brain kids who has no attention span, but, maybe the film is long. I don't know. You don't get much criticism on the film of the drivers, obviously, because they're not going to say anything negative about the film, really, but you get some little bits here and there, such as that little comment from Antonelli. And Hulkenberg says, look, it's a movie. You need to take a step back and see the broader picture. It's not about the fine details that everything is accurate. So I think that kind of tells you what you need to know. Ocon was talking about how Hamilton definitely had some influence. It's kind of what I talked about with using strap mode with the battery, locking up at Silverstone into the final corner. He reckons it's more realistic than other films, and as Lawson says, you can find holes and poke holes in things, so it's pretty interesting stuff. I'll probably end up going to see it, and I'm sure that it'll be probably what I expect, to be honest. But if you go into it looking like it's going to be a spectacle, then it's probably going to be okay. Hamilton, of course, talked about it as well, and was discussing how kind of impressive it was that they'd accomplished this, because of course he was involved to some great degree with the process of the film, but of course would not have had full control over the direction of the accuracy of things, because at the end of the day there has got to be some sort of Hollywood creative license. Now, before we talk about the Monaco Grand Prix stuff, I just wanted to quickly run back to this. We talked about all this drama lately with the McLaren rear brake duct, how they might be cooling the tyres, or at least keeping the brakes in the right temperature window, and therefore keeping the tyres not getting warmed up too much, and especially on the harder compounds where core temperature is more valuable. That seems to be a big talking point. Now, Red Bull came up with loads of ideas as to what McLaren might be doing, and they submitted them all to the FIA, and the FIA pretty much unanimously said, no, Article 11.5 says liquid cooling in the brakes is forbidden. And then Red Bull said, what about this? And they said, no, you can't use water. And then they said, what about this? And the FIA said, no, you can't use water, right? So basically that's what's happened. But the interesting part, I guess, and we talked about the Peltier devices yesterday, and you guys were discussing it in the comments, but the key point really is that the article that is being contravened here by any sort of use of fluid is Article 1.15 or 11.5, which states liquid cooling of the brakes is forbidden, right? Now, is there another way to read this? As in, okay, if liquid cooling of the brakes is forbidden, is it possible to warm them up using liquid, or whatever the case is, right? Because before they're at the optimal temperature, maybe there's something about this you could do. Look, I just wanted to share this little thread here because a couple of guys pointed out to me here from Rolando, and I don't know if this guy has any idea what he's talking about. But I just wanted to share it as another theory, basically, as to what McLaren might be doing, because, I mean, yeah, the theory is that maybe McLaren don't cool the brakes using liquid, but actually it heats them up to the minimal operating temperature, and then uses exhaust heat heat to make it happen, uses this pipe maybe, I don't know. But and discussing like some of the ideas that could make that potentially happen. Look, it's a very Formula One thing to see a rule that says you can't cool like the brakes using liquid and think, well, maybe if we're not cooling them but we're doing something else that isn't technically cooling, maybe we can get away with it. Like, it's the type of thing that Formula One teams would do. Now, whether this will actually work or anything, I don't know, but his kind of conclusion is that the brake duct cooling is therefore oversized, which, to be fair, it is compared to other teams, and it does have a cost in drag that we've discussed before. So, you know, again, you've got to look at the smoke and think about what the fire might be, and it's just another theory, but I think nobody really knows what's going on at the moment. But let's talk about Monaco. There's a few interesting things that happened. You guys remember in Imola where Kimi Antonelli brought his whole class along and then had an absolute stinker Grand Prix where he unfortunately had no pace in front of the Tifosi, who were supporting Ferrari, but also the Italian driver, and then had to retire from the race. Jacques Villeneuve always had an entertaining take on things. He says, you need to focus on the racing, and it had an effect on him. Just remind yourself it's your office. Don't bring friends and family to your office, he says. Look, do I think it made much difference on the weekend? Really? Probably not, but I thought it was an entertaining statement, so I thought we'd look at it. This is Adrian Newey, arriving into the paddock for the first time with Aston Martin. Here he is. We've got, pretty nice, the Red Bull logo in the background, of course, his former team, and now he's with Aston Martin in the Monaco paddock. So it's going to be very interesting to see whether Aston Martin can keep up some of their decent progress, because let's also remember, this weekend in Monaco, it's also a C4, C5, C6 weekend. So we're using also the newer compound, the C6. Now in Imola, which is a more taxing circuit on the tyre, but in Imola, that was not the best tyre. The best tyre was the medium, in qualifying even, and the C5, and that's the tyre that Aston Martin used to great effect. So I do wonder whether they can cook something up similar again. You know, maybe they feel like the C5 could still be the stronger tyre, even around a circuit which is less taxing on the tyres as Monaco is compared to Imola, but certainly interested to hear your thoughts on that in the comments section below. But Ferrari are the big talking point. Charles Leclerc won this Grand Prix last year, famously in front of the Monegasque fans, and it was a sensational moment for the sport. As bad as the Grand Prix was, it was horrific. But, apart from, if you don't watch the Grand Prix and you just watch qualifying, it was a good moment, and Leclerc finally got the win for the first time in, like 70 years or whatever, since a Monegasque had won that Grand Prix. But Ferrari this year are in a rather different position to last year, right? Ferrari's, some of their biggest strengths last year were their dominance in some of the slower speed corners and the traction zones, and it was expected that last year Ferrari should be strong, and to be fair, that has been a strength of Ferrari now for some time. The reason why they've been good in Monaco in recent years. They've always been pretty competitive. Sometimes they've won it, and sometimes they've thrown it away, circa 2022. Let's not think about that too much again, because that was painful for everyone. Now, Hamilton says, we'll take the positives from Imola, because there were some. Lots to digest. It's only been a few days. Hope that we can have a good weekend. A very different track. Typically, Ferrari have gone well here, but as you know, quali is everything. We've struggled so far this year. So this is kind of like the double whammy really here for Ferrari, is that their qualifying has been bad, because it seems like the compromise they have to make to even have some race pace means they sacrifice quali performance. But of course, in Monaco, quali performance is everything. And yeah, it's been a problem for them to get really any production. Even, for Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton, look, Hamilton may not be the qualifier that he was, but he still has the most pole positions in the history of Formula One, and Charles Leclerc, I would still say, is the best qualifier on the grid. I mean, the last couple of years, evidence is that. This year, he's, frankly, probably not had a chance to prove it. I think he's been putting in some great laps. He said it himself. I mean, Leclerc's putting in laps that he says are spectacular laps, and yet he ends up P5, P6, P11, right? So, that probably tells you what you need to know. And Leclerc says that, unfortunately, even with that lack of quali performance from the SF25, their main issue is the slow speed corners, and Monaco is a rather slow speed circuit. As he says, our car hasn't been strong there, and here, that's all there are. So Auto Racer do an article on it. They talk about some of the reactions. Leclerc, of course, is probably more frustrated than Hamilton is, because Hamilton's just moved here. Leclerc's dealt with this now for 7 years, and he says, we're not satisfied with the car. It's negative, the judgment on the car. We're not at all satisfied with the performance. Last year, we were fighting for the championship. We had lots of ambition, but I still believe until the end, which is the classic Charles Leclerc way. And so, we know that there's a change to the technical regulations for the wings. It should be an advantage for us, say Ferrari, but it remains uncertain. They go on to say that our weak points have been the slow corners. I expect a complicated weekend. This is the funny thing, really, from Leclerc. At the same time, the circuit is so special and unique that we can hope there is something in the car that we have not yet discovered and will reveal itself here, which is just like hilarious Ferrari copium, where we're literally hoping for just magic to unfold. We're like, well, you never know. I won here last year in Monaco. In a Ferrari, maybe this year, the car just arrives on the track and decides it's going to be good. And just like, you know, the physics just works. I don't know. So that's where Ferrari are now, that Charles Leclerc was like, well, you know, maybe the 8th Grand Prix of the season, magically the car's just going to be great. And who knows, maybe there'll be some magic that will unfold here. And maybe it's true that, you know, Monaco's so unique that maybe there is something that they can find that helps them this weekend, but it's not going to be ideal. And it should be a double whammy, really, where you've got poor quality pace, poor performance in those particular corners because of the rear suspension, which seems to be pretty faulty right now. I mean, ideally, they'd have loved to get the new rear suspension they're working on for Monaco so they can deal with some of the slower speed traction issues that they've got and performance in the low speed corners for this weekend's. But yeah, Hamilton says it's a great motivation, or Hamilton, like Leclerc said, it's a great motivation, but Hamilton was effectively confident maybe that they can do something, but it's not exactly guaranteed by any means. Hamilton did at least have a smile on his face at media day, saying it's a natural progression in the year, feeling more comfortable in the team, grateful to be here. And who knows where we're going to go next. But the reality is that this season for Ferrari, compared to where they would want to be, is certainly nowhere near where they would want to be. Thought it was an interesting comment from Max, actually, on the overtake that he made in Imola. This weekend's such an overtake isn't really possible, just given the nature of the circuit. But, you know, there was so much reaction to that overtake that he made at the first lap of Imola. I know that Jolyon Palmer did some analysis on the out lap that Max did. So when he did the reconnaissance lap, and he was pretty aggressive on his braking into turn 1 during the reconnaissance lap to get an idea of, okay, how much grip am I really going to have here on the outside? And Oscar, you know, I think was just too conservative, and like he recognised that after the Grand Prix. Max was, I'm sure, pretty surprised as well. George was fuming about the way that Piastri drove that situation, having defended so hard from him just to lose the position anyway. But yeah, as Max says, when I got home after the race on Sunday, I watched it again. When I went through the corner, I had to laugh. That was good, I thought. So, you know, I thought that was kind of a cool statement there from Max. If you look back, you can see that he's very concerned with Russell because he was actually second, so he didn't expect that. I understand that, and I took the momentum on the outside, then you can't react anymore. But I think that, you know, Piastri will learn, and certainly should have learned, that if that was Max in Piastri's position there's no way in the hell that he lets that move happen. So, you know, lots to learn, I think, but very much interested in your thoughts in the comments. Just one final thing before we close out the video I wanted to mention. Currently here in Dallas, again, for Call of Duty event to cover the next couple of days, the Monaco Grand Prix timings are such that, well, they're, let's say, late morning here in Dallas when everything concludes, at which time I'll be at the venue doing a show. So I'm not 100% sure how I'm going to get the content out in reaction to practice, and I think for the race I'll make it work, but for the other sessions I'm not 100% sure as and when I'll be able to do the content. I'll do my best to get you guys something during the day, but it might be a little bit tricky, so yeah, bear with me anyway. I'll do my best, but it's going to be a fascinating weekend. I'm looking forward to the Indy 500 as well, but as we know, qualifying really should be the most important thing, but I think the race is going to be fascinating with this whole two-stop drama as well. So practice tomorrow and qualifying Saturday, race on Sunday. You guys know the drill. Very much interested in your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.